and welcome. Today we are going to be discussing very basic color theory. In your packet, you should have received a red, a blue, a yellow, a black, and a white. If you didn't receive these in your kit, please reach out to us and let us know. You've also received a packet of brushes with blue on them, like so. Okay, and they are kind of brownish color like this. Also let us know if you haven't received these. For those of you watching at home, thank you for joining us. Those of you who are clients at DSI, hi! Thanks for watching. I'm excited to do some art with you guys. Now our basic color theory today is going to be based around our regular kind of elementary school knowledge primary colors. Are there other primary colors out there that are made with cyan and magenta and yellow and things like that? Yes, there are, but we're not really going to get into those today. Okay, we're going to use the kind of traditionalist primary colors just because they're really accessible and they're easy for people to learn with. Okay, so today we're going to kind of go through basic color theory, learning about the primary colors, secondary, tertiary, and we're going to discuss things like what is saturation, what's desaturation, what is a neutral, what's a tint, a tone, and a shade. And then we're going to kind of discuss how to kind of use different paints to kind of practice. Okay, so what I like to do here is I like to take my colors, which are my primaries, and your primary colors are these ones right here on the plate. You have your red, and let me turn it this way. You have your red, your blue, and your yellow. And you can set them up in whichever order you want on your color wheel. Doesn't really matter. If I've already marked them for you at home, please stick with that just so you don't get confused. But if you're making your own at home, it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is just very easily, I'm going to take a little bit of color and I'm going to just swipe across, flip my brush over like this, clean it off. I'm using a filbert brush for this, but you can use whatever you want because we're not really about accuracy in our shapes and our brush strokes today. What we're about is learning how color works, okay? So you can use any old little brush you have as long as it lets you sweep color across. So I'm going to go ahead and get some blue. I'm going to sweep across this way just as a reminder. I'm going to do the same thing over here for my yellow. Making sure to get the extra water out. We don't want too much water to start out with. We really want to see the pigments in the paints and yellow there. So then I know that's where I'm going to plant those colors when I start out. Okay, so primary colors are called primary because these are the main colors that you start out with when you're painting. They're the colors that most other colors are based off of. Not every color can be achieved through your primary colors. There's some things like neons and weird colors like a real true violet-y color is very hard to achieve through just these type of colors here. Usually you buy those, but there's so many different colors that we can make with just these three colors and a black and a white. So we're going to talk about those today. So our primary colors are kind of grandparent colors where all the colors come from that we deal with as beginners are our red and our blue and our yellow. So what we're going to do is in the outside color wheel here, we are going to go ahead and make a gradient wheel from one color to the next. It's not a chopped up wheel. We're going to sweep color and then we're going to move color into the next color and vice versa. Okay, so I'm going to start out by getting some blue right here. I'm going to get a pretty decent amount and I'm going to sweep quickly back and forth in this area. I'm not too worried about perfection. You're going to be doing this also on a piece of paper just for practice so you can see how color works. So it might not sweep as pretty as you want, but that is okay. Not too worried about it right now. All right, so I have my blue there, and I see how I left a chunk over here in between, kind of stops where it says P or V there. That's purple violet. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to clean out my brush. And you can use multiple brushes for this if you prefer, if you're a time saver. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get my red, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sweep my color back and forth right underneath my label inside there. And I'm going to start to move my color into this area here where it says purple violet. And when I'm doing this, I'm going back and forth between that and my blue. And I'm going to pull some of that color with me. I'm going to grab a little bit more blue because it dries quickly. There we go. And when I'm moving these two colors together, you can see it starts to turn kind of a purpley color. You want to keep it about half and half for your color formula. That's kind of important when you're doing this. And this is not a very heavy body acrylic. I did not send you guys heavy body acrylics for several reasons. A heavy body acrylic is a very thick acrylic. It's nice because you can water it down and make it kind of the shape, or rather the texture and viscosity that you want, like the thickness and how it moves. But it's also a lot more expensive, and that means that there's less art that we can do. So as beginners, we can always add water to something if we need to, but since it's hard to judge that at first, I've sent you pre-watered down acrylics that are a little bit thinner to begin with. Okay, so I'm going through, and to blend, all I'm doing just for this is I'm just going back and forth. Really, that's literally it. See how I'm sweeping? Sweep, sweep, sweep. Sweeping back and forth like I'm sweeping a floor. Well, I guess technically a sweep of floor would be in one direction, but I'm going back and forth like this. So you can see the colors are starting to blend from one to the next. And now my red, if I touch it, ooh, it's dry over here. My blue is dry. So I have to reapply paint in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and reapply some red in this area right here, through here, going back over that way. Snuck a little bit into this area there. I'm not worried about it. It doesn't matter. It is not about perfection at the moment. Don't care. All right. Get the extra out. Always want to bang on the sides like that. Plus it's kind of a fun sound. And I'm going to go over here and get my yellow. And I'm going to start right where my yellow is, and I'm going to move this way. The reason I do that is because I want a nice pure area. Each time we do this, we want a nice pure saturated area. Okay, saturation means color purity with no neutrality, no tints, no shades, no tones. And we'll talk about what those are in a little while. So now we have our in-between area. And here's a little trick about yellow. Yellow requires more yellow when you're painting with most paints than it does with red. So if you want to get an orange, you need to use more yellow. The reason for that is that yellow is a very thin paint. The chemicals and pigments that it takes to make a yellow tend to be thin. And the formulas that they make, they haven't really figured out a good way to make a very good yellow yet. So that's always going to be a little thinner than any of the other colors will. So don't be afraid to add a little bit more on there. In theory, it should be half and half, but it just doesn't work out that way in reality. So going ahead and bringing those across like that, so you can see it changes into orange. Beautiful. Going to get the extra off here, banging on the sides, dampening off, and you, like I said, you don't want too much water right now, especially since you're using paper. You'll go right through it. I'm going to freshen up this area here back and forth like this. So you can see it kind of change a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Now you can see our colors starting to form over here. You can see our purple violet. You can see our orange, but we still have green down here, right? And green is achieved through, you guessed it, whatever colors are on the other side, whatever in between a primary color, that's called your secondary color. It's secondary because it comes only after second to the primary colors. It can't exist without mixing one of those together. So that's an important thing to remember. In art, there's a lot of names for things that we don't necessarily need names for, but it helps you communicate to other people about your color systems. So I'm going to go ahead and get some yellow, going back and forth like this. Sweeping it over, remembering that yellow needs a lot more of itself because it's thinner than the other color next to it. So putting on, getting kind of a juicy amount of yellow here, right up into my blue there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get off the extra yellow so we can really appreciate how one crawls into the other one. I'm going to go over here and freshen up my blue, add some blue back in there, like so. And I'm going to start to move it this way so we can see the green start to show up. And notice as I crawl some of the blue over this way from the other side, I'm running out, right? So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and clean off your brush, get the extra out, okay? And then over here, I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow, you guessed it, and I'm going to massage it into there going back and forth because that's kind of what blending is. Blending is just massaging, and how well you massage depends on what you're trying to do. Going back and forth, getting out that extra, going on the edge there like this. I'm just kind of filling it in there. Okay, so there's your kind of basic color wheel. You can kind of see it change from one color to the next. If I change it this way like that so you can see it. Okay, now those colors here, which are our secondary colors and our primary colors, they also can be made lighter or darker. Okay, so this is what we call full saturation. All these colors don't have black or white added to them, or colors that are opposite on the color wheel, or another color on this section here to change it at all, to make it kind of muddy or kind of neutral, feeling kind of dampened out. So what we're going to do is we're going to create versions of those in here. So the ones that we use the most here are the shades and the tints, and we're first learning. But later on, as we develop into better color theorists, we're going to use some other color systems. Okay, so first what we're going to do here is, you guessed it, I'm going to grab some blue. Okay, I'm going to put down a dab of blue right there. And then I'm going to get out a little bit of white, like this. Give myself a little dab of white over there. And with acrylic paint, especially the thin stuff, you don't need that much. It goes a long way. What I poured over here is plenty. And I simply over poured so you can see the colors. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick up some of the white and I'm going to add it in there like that. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and forth like this in the same areas that I just did. So I'm staying with my light blue right here like that. Cleaning out my brush. And you're probably thinking, well, how much of each one should I use? Guess what? Just a little bit to start out with. That's the answer, because you're going to have different size projects in different areas, and I can't say use only 2 little dabs of white for this, because I don't know what you're painting. For a color wheel here, I use 1 and 1. So that means 1 basically scoop or dab of blue and 1 scoop or dab of white. Okay, and you're going to do that for each one of these. So I'm going to go over here to my red next. So I have kind of a scoop there. I'm going to put it down, clean off my brush as always. Get the extra water out, pick up a dab of white, put it there, and massage back and forth. Going back and forth like so, and going between the two. Cleaning off my brush. I'm going to grab a little bit of blue and a little bit of white over here, like this, back and forth, like so, so you can see how that purpley kind of color showing up. And see how it's kind of bland and kind of neutral. All these colors are kind of bland. They're not real beachy over the head colors, okay? And that is because we have added white to them. We've neutralized them or desaturated them, okay? And then over here we have our pinkish color, will be our pink, but we're going to use our red and our yellow, okay? And we're going to put those down with white as well. So I'm going to go over here and get some yellow. 1 dab of yellow. Clean my brush off. And then I'm going to go ahead and get 1 dab of white. Mix this in appropriately and going back and forth, like so. Okay, I might have grabbed a little too much yellow there. Bringing it over this way towards my red. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of that red there, just so I can massage it in there, and you can see it start to change it to kind of a peachy color. Okay. Change over that way. And then at the bottom here we have a green that's going to show up, which is a combination of your blue and your yellow. And at this point, since a small amount of room, I'm going to go ahead and add a little dab of blue, a little bit more yellow, right? And then a dab of white, like so. I'm going to mix it up. It's probably more than we needed. Get the extra off, go back and forth like this. Now blue's already dried, but yellow isn't. Massage back and forth like this. Get the extra off over here. Get a little bit of blue. Add to that section there. bring it around like this. And that's kind of the general gist. Is it very eloquently blended? Nah, who cares? We're just learning. I'm not worried about it. That takes a lot of time. Good blending is achieved through time and practice. And guess what? I don't think you want to watch me blend for 3 hours, so we're not doing that today. We're simply learning about the color systems, okay? So you have saturated, and then here you have these colors that are kind of neutralized a little bit, okay? And then you have the next set, which is going to be adding black to it. So we're going to go ahead and get black for this next section. So when you add white, by the way, to something, we call it a tint, okay? We call it a tint. And then when we add black to something, which we're going to do in the middle in a little tiny wheel, we call it a shade, okay? I know it's kind of confusing because people tint their windows, right? And their windows get darker, but guess what? That's kind of an incorrect term, really. So tint is when you add white in painting, and then a shade is when you add black, okay? So we're going to go ahead and do a little version. You're going to want to take out a small brush if you're painting along or you're watching and you're going to paint afterwards. So I'm going to use a smaller filbert brush here. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to get my blue, just like we've done before, go over in the blue section there, put some down. And now we're in the circle part, so I'm just going to kind of massage in the area. I'm going to add a little tiny bit of black in there, like that, maybe a little bit more. There you go, like so. Kind of massaging it to kind of a pie shape, like that. I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush out, like always. Want to keep that brush pretty clean. A lot of artists keep lots of brushes on hand so that you don't have to keep washing brush after brush. But I kind of feel like I form a relationship with a brush after I've been using it for a while, and we kind of know each other well. I know how it handles and how its weight is. So you can do either. It's up to you. As an artist, I like to deal with one brush over and over for a while until I'm ready to switch to something, a different brush that I need for a different style. But that's totally up to you. So now we have the blue here. I'm going to switch over to red right there with a little bit of black there. Going to mix it on up. Going to bring it on over there. Ooh, that dries fast. Grab a little bit of that blue and black again. And it's hard to see probably because it's so dark, but in reality you can see a little bit of that purple there. I'll clean my brush off. By the way, we'll discuss as we paint later on together how to clean your brushes, but what you want to know to start with is you want a gentle plunging motion and then swirling, plunging and swirling. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to get a yellow, put in this area, and now yellow is the same, it's kind of inverse, it's the opposite when we're painting with it. Normally we need a lot of yellow, but black is a very potent color. It's thicker. It tends to have more light blocking qualities, so it kind of blocks out some of the color from whatever you're using it, and that's why it gets darker. But it especially does that to yellow because it's already thin, so you need less black. You don't want to go too dark because it's going to get dark quick. Look at that, see? It gets real dark real quick. The video's lighting it up, but trust me, over here it is all dark. I'm going to go ahead and bring this over all the way since we're going to be able to go ahead and fully blend these now. Because it's a small area. When you're working in smaller areas on paper, ooh, you can go kind of fast there. Back and forth like this. See kind of our dirty orange color kind of show up there. Like so. And then we have kind of a dirty green color we have over here. So we have yellow, a little bit of blue, teensy bit of black. Mix it up. Oop, I think I need a little bit more yellow. There we go. Over that way. And kind of just gently massage back and forth like that. We're going to go right into our blue there with a little bit of black. Same thing, going back and forth. And you can see how it kind of merges one thing into the next. Little stark difference there, but that's okay. Cleaning out our brush, setting it aside, putting our palettes off to the side. And by the way, when you use a palette at home, you can use whatever you want. Any little piece of plastic that's laying around. I like to use Tupperware lids because they are plentiful. Use that, or not yogurt lid, but use that cottage cheese lid. Use that Tupperware from takeout. Anything that comes in a tub, save it, because you can use this and rewash them again. Don't go out and buy more palettes and things off Amazon and stuff like that. Just use something like this. For this next section, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of show you how in larger sections, how our primary and our secondary color really kind of blend together and how they kind of become a family, okay? And then primary and secondary colors, they make these kind of in-between colors. We're going to kind of talk about those a little bit. But to start out with, to make your secondary colors, you're going to need to fill in these block areas here, or rather these circle areas, and kind of like a Venn diagram, which means two circles that overlap and give relating information. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a little bit of water. It's okay if your water's a little bit dirty, to the edge of your paint. And acrylic paint can be watered down. You can also use some of the watercolors that I sent as well. Although I prefer you start with this just because it's good to practice watering acrylic down. And that watercolors don't always work like you think they will for making color wheels and things like that. There's some tricks with them. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use the blue to fill in an entire blue area like this. This whole circle is going to be blue. And just use the thin blue. Don't use a thick blue. You don't need one. Nice and thin. And it's okay if you have little scratches and different brush strokes in it. It does not matter. We're just proving a point how this works. Going in and achieving a nice light blue there. I'm going to go ahead and get some of the water here. And we're going to use the yellow. Now remember, because yellow's thinner, you want to use just a slight bit more than you did with your blue. Okay. Go ahead and filling in our yellow area here. Got a little tinge of green in there already. Didn't wash my brush out very well. Have our yellow color there. And our yellow color is going to go ahead and just overlap the blue. And because we see an overlapping color happen there, look at what we see. We see our green show up all by itself. So if you have clients who have a hard time doing their color wheel, this is kind of nice to do, is keep around as like a color recipe, okay? Or if they do this as a practice, you want to go ahead and keep this with you too as like a reference, because sometimes people forget when they're learning, or they, you know, have trouble remembering later on, even if they've practiced quite a bit. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one, our next diagram. And when it comes to your water, my water is starting to get pretty dirty, which is going to affect my yellow a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. But it's important to realize if I stick my finger in here, it's still very watery. It's not thick at all. It's not thick at all. It just looks like slightly dirty water when you mess with it on your finger. If that's what you have, you're in good shape. Now, if your water starts to get kind of soupy, like Campbell's soup out of a can, you better change it. So next we are doing this one here. We'll do the blue again, watered down blue. And I'm just diving in and getting some water straight from the jar, going in, dipping in, pushing back at an angle like that, and dotting down. That's just an easy way of doing it. Some artists keep watered down paint around for things like this, or different variations of paint, the same color, watered down to different levels, and I don't have time for that, do you? Well, that seems like a lot of work. I'm going to stick with this. So filling in my circle here, I like to start on this side so I can kind of see how it works. And then fill this side in there. Make sure you don't lose where your circle ends for your client when you're helping them. And if they do lose it, tell them to stop for a second and draw it back in. Okay, so we have our blue. Clean out from brush, going over here, adding some water onto my red, mixing it up very well. And red, as far as I'm concerned, tends to be a thicker paint. I'd say out of red, blue, and yellow, it's a shot in the dark whether red or blue is going to be thicker with any paint brand. And when you're going out and you're buying paint in the community, make sure that you look to make sure you find something that says a primary red, because as you'll learn when you paint, and you'll get better at identifying color when you're out in the store, you see all these things that have different names and they all look like red to you when you start out. But guess what? Each color has a little bit of a different color and color compounds, which means that you add it with something else and it adds new information, or it adds some kind of change. And that happens every time you add a new step of something else. So if you start with a color that's not a primary, it's a little bit of a secondary color, you're gonna have some issues when you try to do other stuff later on. So make sure your primary colors, when you buy them, if you're gonna use them to create other colors, are actual primaries. So you can see our kind of plumish color there. It's important to know that, you know, the color that's like super royal purple, it's not gonna be something that you can really make out of your primary colors. You have to buy royal purple. What you can make is a violet or a plum color. And that's usually more often used in painting anyway. It's pretty rare to have a true violet in nature. It just doesn't happen very often. So we don't end up using it that much, but you can always buy it from a tube. Then we have red and yellow. So go ahead and I'm gonna get the yellow first. I'm just gonna do full on yellow since it's the bottom color, like so. And we need it to be thicker anyway, so you can see it more potently. And then I'll be lighter with the red. So again, our nice yellow there is our pop through. Cleaning out the bottom there of the brush. And every once in a while with a brush, you're gonna wanna maintain your brush shape by pinching it or reshaping it. That's part of being a painter. Your brush is a tool that you have to keep an eye on. You have to babysit it a little bit. Except no one pays you to do it except you. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna use the watered down red and fill this whole section in here. Nice and gentle like. Not worrying if we get outside the lines, who cares? Doesn't matter. In fact, if you wanna get a little wild with it, go for it. We are not about perfection here, we're about learning. Okay, and as we crisscross these colors together, we will see that we have a nice orange in the middle there. And the red down there is a little hard to see, so I'm gonna go ahead and thicken that up a little bit, simply because of the angle of the light on the lens here that we're recording with. Looks kind of hard to see, so I'm gonna double down on that for you. There you go. And you can see our primary colors, two primaries make a secondary, okay? So that being said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna move on over here, and very quickly, I'm going to make a Venn diagram with all three primary colors. We're gonna see some interesting things happen, so stay tuned and watch for that. Sorry about the bounce. Gonna go ahead and get that yellow, fill it in here. I wanna fill in the whole yellow. Don't be shy. Whole yellow. Okay, clean off our brush. Gonna go ahead next and get blue. I'm gonna get down my watered down blue. Okay, starting over here, like this. Going through there. And as you can see the green popping through. So the only colors that have been overlapped so far. Go ahead and clean that off. And sometimes what you want to do too is you want to wait a second. So I'm actually going to do that because if I mix these colors too much, I'm going to pull them out this way, and you'll see why that's a problem in a second. So bear with me. Count down to 5. 5, 4, 3, 2. Now we waited a couple seconds for this to get a little more dry. So what we're gonna do here is gonna get this red color. I'm gonna fill this in with a nice bright red, just this little part here, since that is still just a little bit wet. Fill that in, and then I'm going to use a slightly watered down red here, like so. Go through this section there. Okay, and then go ahead and even out the Venn diagram a little bit in the center there, where I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of the blue and the yellow together here. Kind of fill in some more of this green. Whoops, a little bit more of that yellow, I think. And I need just a little hint of that red in the middle. All right, there we go. So, what I do is I'm going to bring this a little bit closer so you can see with this little diagram that we have here. We have our yellow, we have our red and our blue. You can see the crisscross areas where the red and the blue become purple, yellow and blue become green, red and yellow become orange. But in the middle, look what happens when you mix all three of your primary colors or all three of your secondary colors together. You get brown, okay? So people are always asking me, hey Jen, how do I get brown? How do I get brown? Jen, how do I get brown? This is how you get brown, okay? There's some cheater ways to get brown, like this, which is you can do this where you take some red, like that, and you add a teeny bit of black, and depending if it's a primary red or not, if it's not a primary red, then it's going to look brown, okay, because it already has a secondary color in it. Ah, that's a good way to tell if your color is actually a primary color or not. So this still looks pretty crimsony. Doesn't really look brown. So this is a pretty true primary, even though it's kind of a off-brand. It's not that bad as far as the pigment being true. So that's a nice test, okay? Now here is something fun you're going to want to pay attention to. We're going to talk about how if you go across from something on the color wheel, either here or our large color wheel that we did earlier, these are our complementary colors. A color that's opposite from the other thing on the color wheel, from here to here, there to there, there to there, is going to darken the other color depending on how much you make, how much you put into it. So watch this next section for understanding how to use complementary colors to darken something. We're going to be talking about complementary colors. So on our color wheel, let's take a look here and see. If we use this one here, if I go from yellow across this way, we get blue. So anything that you make a triangle with is your complementary color here. But over here, it's kind of whatever's across from it. So if you go from green here, if you go straight across, look at what's up there, there's red. Here, purple or violet goes across and it's yellow, orange, and blue. Okay? And a lot of times you'll see colors that are opposite of each other lay next to one another, because when they're next to one another, they create a lot of contrast. Okay? And that's why they're used in things like logos and sports teams and things like that, because they're bright and colorful, and contrast is something that sticks out from another thing. Light against dark, bright against not bright, colorful against not colorful. There's lots of ways to achieve contrast, but this is one of the ways that a lot of different artists achieve it. So over here, check it out. We're going to do a 50-50 split of these different things. Or I'm sorry, we're going to do a little less than 50-50. 50-50 over here, you'll see what it looks like. Let's see here. Actually, you know what? We will do 50-50. Hold on. So half and half. So red, okay, and green. We go like this. I'm going to crisscross them. Red and green, which is blue and yellow, crisscross like this. In the middle, we will get a kind of brownish color there. Okay, so we have a brown there. Clean this off. Let's move over to purple or plum, violet, and yellow. Yellow is pretty simple. And notice how most of the time these complementary colors, they can be tertiary colors, which we'll talk about, but complementaries are often colors that are a primary plus a secondary color, okay? So we had our primary color of red, and then we have the other one over here, okay, of green, which is your secondary. So moving over here, we have purple, which is blue and red, half and half here. A little bit more red there. little bit more red. Come on, red. Don't be scared. There we go. It's a nice dark plum color. And then we have yellow. Mix that together there this way. I'll just go like this so you can see it. And there you go. You have another variation of a brown color. Okay. Then we have orange, which is yellow with a little bit of red, right? Not as much because we know yellow's thinner. I'm gonna go ahead and just go across like this. And then I'm go ahead and get blue, which is our primary color. A little bit there, go across, mix it all up. I think I need a little bit more of my orange. And look at that. We have another kind of brownish color. There you go. And you can see there's different ways to achieve different colored browns. Okay, it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do. And don't forget, you can always add white or black into any of those to change your color as well. Next, we're going to be discussing tertiary colors, what they are and how they work. Tertiary colors, they're kind of like a cookie recipe. So if you have a cookie, and we're making cookies, and you like chocolate chips, and I like macadamia nuts, but the recipe for the cookie is the same, okay? We're not going to have to worry too much about that part. What we worry about is the amount of the thing that we add that we like, right? So over here, it's your macadamia nuts, and over here, it's your chocolate chips, okay? And I guess I should turn this way for you, because it's upside down for you guys, okay? So that being said, a tertiary color is really just a mixture of these in-between colors right here, okay? And as you go more this way, it gets more purple red, and if you go this way, it gets more blue red. Same thing here when it comes to the tertiary colors. It's where your secondary color is, but it's the in-betweens, in between those. So over here, if I'm in my green and I slide over this way, my green becomes more yellow-green. If I slide over this way, it becomes more blue-green. And then the same thing can be said over here, yellow-green, and then more of an orange-yellow, right? So same thing, violet-red, okay? See how it can change here, or blue-violet, right there. That's all it is. And like a cookie recipe, if you like something, you add more of it. So if we're making a purple, and our recipe says half and half, here's our recipe, half and half. Like so. We'll start out and we'll make each cookie half and half. So purple, like a plum color, a dark plum violet. Now, you like red more in your color. So guess what you add more? You want more of a purple red. It's as simple as adding more red into it. That's all there is. People are like, well, how come this one's more purple? Or rather more blue? Well, guess what? It's more blue because somebody added more blue to it. That's all there is. It is a recipe, just like cooking. If you want more of something and you want to taste it, add more of it. When you're creating color wheels, you're tasting with your eyes. So if you want more blue purple, add that in. More red, the same. Remember, it's just a recipe and you're the artist, you're the cook, and you can decide what it is that you want. So when people name these, this is where it gets a little confusing. They name them in a certain way. So if I say to you, that color is real purple, it's purple red. What's the difference between purple red and red purple? Well, purple red means whatever color is in the front is more important, okay? So purple red means it's more purple than it is red, okay? Or rather, it's a red that's on the purple side. And a yellow orange would be an orange that is over here. It's more yellow, okay? An orange red would be a red that's more orange, okay? Or it's kind of here. So it's your starting color that you're using plus the addition of the other color. That's all. It's like cooking. And if you like cooking, you'll love mixing colors. It's kind of fun to do. The last thing we're going to talk about is, what's a tone? What the heck is a tone, really? A tone's not something that people talk about too often when they first start painting, but it's something that's actually super important, and I'd love for you to get it in your brain now rather than wait till you're more advanced to start dealing with tones, because a lot of the colors in our world are not like this. We like to paint like this because it's expressive, but if you ever get to the point where you want to paint realistic, you got to throw a lot of this out, and you're going to use a lot of neutral colors and complementary colors and a lot of weird color mixing that's not just on this wheel, okay? And one of those things is what is a tone? A tone is when you take any color and you add gray to it. And what's gray? Gray is white plus black is gray. That's it. And you can make darker grays by adding more black, or you can make them lighter grays by adding more white and going the opposite way. And you can keep adding to either way that you want just by adjusting the amount of color that you add. So remember, color is like cooking. If you want to taste more of something, you have to add more of something. And we taste with our eyes when it comes to art. Okay, so why is that important? Well, because a gray is the best neutralizer. Neutral means feeling without color, okay, and feeling calm, and it kind of helps dull down colors. And a lot of people say, well, why would you want to dull down a color? That sounds awful. Well, because like I said, in the real world, a lot of colors are blunted. They're not fully saturated like our color wheel, okay? And these in-between colors make up a lot of our world. They also are very expressive, and we'll talk a little bit about color theory and emotions after this. So as we have the gray here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put down a dab of blue, a dab of red, kind of breaking my own rule and using multiple brushes now. And I'll wait for a second to do the rest of it. I'm going to grab some white, put it down, dab of black, put it down, and I'm going to go ahead and mix those colors up. And now I have a pink color, but it has black added to it, and it's dulled down a little bit. Ooh, look at that. Not too bad, right? And it looks pretty different from the color that's on here, either one of them. You can see. It's in between. And see how neutral it is? And what's kind of interesting about this kind of grayish color here is that it feels like it can live in either world. Okay? So the same thing would happen over here. We'll just call it a purple since I already have pink on here instead of a blue. So we'll mix this together there. Gets a little tiny bit more black added to it. And same thing. This is going to be a tone. So it has black and white added to it. So we can see here, it's a little closer to this one, okay, but it can kind of live any of those worlds. And it definitely stands out against the saturation over here. You can see there's a big difference between a tone and a fully saturated blue or a purple over in this area. What we're going to talk about next is monochromatic color, okay? Monochromatic means one color. Mono means one, chromatic means of color. So one color means basically you're picking blue or red or yellow or any of the colors and you're adding white or black to it in different steps to get different types of color. So let's make a couple different blues, for instance. Let's see. Let's make, here's a regular old blue. Let's make a blue that has a hint, it's still much more blue than it is anything else, a hint of red in it, which would make it slightly purple, slightly purple. Okay, so slightly secondary blue. Much more blue than anything else. Go ahead and clean off there. Let's go ahead and make a blue that has black added to it. Oops, And the interesting thing about adding black to something is everybody says, well, it's definitely the best way to add black, you know, to make something dark is to add dark to it. We think of shadows in real life and shade, right? And how it'll make it nice and black or nice and dark. But in reality, what it does is it takes away some of that color. It does make it darker, but it kind of takes it away a little bit. There's a way to not have your color muddied and kind of taken away, and that's by doing this. So you can take your blue, and remember how we talked about before, if you do a 50-50 split between colors that are on opposite side of the color wheel, that you'll get a brown. Well, actually, if you use just a little bit of a color that's on the other side of the color wheel, for blue it is, what do we know what it is? Can you guess? It is orange. If you make a little bit of orange and add it in there, watch what happens. So I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna grab a little bit of yellow, put it off the side here, and a little bit of red there. Maybe a little bit more red than that, like that. Now, if I go over here and I add it in there just a little bit, like that, move it around, I will get a slightly darker blue. And it's not the same color as this blue is over here. It's slightly different, okay? It's important to remember that this is a little bit more saturated. It has a little bit more pure color in it than this does, because it's actually two colors, okay? Black is technically not a color. So I know it sounds kind of weird. Black and white are kind of their own things. We call them colors, but they're really not colors as we would refer to them as like something on the color wheel. They're more like additives, okay? So we add them to things and they make things lighter or darker to do different stuff. But adding a color that's opposite on the color wheel can also get you something dark, okay? So there's lots of ways to do that. And don't forget too, you can do the same thing with white, the color white, and adding it, right, to get a tint, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of blue to this here. Then I have a nice light blue there. Don't forget that if we went ahead and we have some blue and some white, and we add a little bit of black to it, we have ourselves a tone. Now look at all these different blues we're making, and there's lots of in-between blues that you can make in here of different colors, but this is just a couple of blues to start out with. There's so many colors in your world, okay? And you can learn to make them with just these couple of paints that are right here to start out with. Like I said, these are not the end-all be-all of paints that are out there. This brand itself, not, you know, a super fancy brand, but it's got a lot of bang for its buck for learning when we're first starting out, and we're just starting to try to get a feel for painting at all. As you get better and better, and what I mean by better and better is you've made up your mind to practice more and more and put more effort into things. As you do that, you want to go ahead and increase the type of supplies that you get. So these don't have as much pigment in them. That's why they feel, no matter what, slightly washed out. And you can also tell because when you pick up the paint, if I go like this to see it, it's very thin, okay? And a heavy body acrylic, even though it's a yellow paint, would be much thicker, and the residue that it leaves behind would be much brighter, okay? And that makes a difference when you're mixing paints together. If it's a little see-through, kind of like glass, it's not gonna be as bright and colorful or as potent as you need it to be in which way you're painting. Okay, so this here is called monochromatic. Monochromatic, so using one color, okay? And you're probably saying, but Jen, there's actually two colors in here, technically speaking. If the brunt of the color is one color, these are all based off of blues, and you add in something else, then yes, it's still considered sort of monochromatic, okay? So these are color families.